Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Billy Dees Podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If this is your first time checking us out, first of all, thank you so much for finding us. I'm glad that you did. Just to let you know, we are primarily an interview podcast and a commentary podcast. And today, a little bit of a trigger warning, if you will. We don't too often talk about violence on this program, but this episode is going to talk about a very violent thing that happened. So if this kind of content isn't your cup of tea, I perfectly understand. When you hear the term true crime, that genre, it usually conjures up mystery and motives and all of these things, and this isn't that. This is as much current events as it is anything else. And it's a very tragic commentary, I believe, on our society and what we are becoming. And it's not just with the perpetrator involved, the person who committed the crime, but it's all these people around them, what happened on social media. And it's very sad, and I felt that this might be worth some attention here on the program, so we're going to talk about this incident. It happened down in Florida, and this story started on Sunday, May 9th. The St. Johns County Sheriff Department received a call about a missing person. And this missing person was a 13-year-old girl by the name of Tristan Bailey. She had gone missing. She was last wearing a cheerleading outfit and a dark-colored shirt. And by all accounts, law enforcement was right on top of this. They went looking for her. People got involved. And as so often happens with these situations, there wasn't a good outcome. Tristan's body was found, and she was found by some local people. It was by sort of a lake type situation, a little bit secluded. And there was some residents nearby, and they had surveillance cameras. And she was spotted on a surveillance camera by one of these cameras, walking with a young male. And this was very late at night, very early in the morning, 1:45 a.m. And then later that morning, the same cameras picked up the young male walking back by himself. The male turned out to be the prime suspect in this murder, 14-year-old Aiden Fucci. A search warrant was obtained on Aiden's home, and they found clothes there that matched the clothes on surveillance, and reportedly some of these clothes tested positive for blood. Aiden changed his story several times under questioning. And he also made a number of admissions during his questioning. Now, when he was first taken into custody, he was brought in as a witness first, not necessarily a suspect. So he wasn't handcuffed and all of these other things. And what he did while he was in the back of the police car was he did a snapshot of himself. And he had a caption that went something like, "Hey guys, anybody seen Tristan lately?" Yeah, that's really, all right. I'll save my commentary for later. Now, this posting more or less sparked a flurry of social media activity. And some of it was very disrespectful to the young lady who had been murdered. And of course, you could say her family, they were exposed to it. And supposedly this Aiden's friends posted some mean things about her, and they also came up with the hashtag Free Aiden. Yeah, because if there's anybody who needs stood up for, it's this young man. These posts became so bad that the local sheriff department had to make a statement that these accounts were using this tragedy to gain fame and to gain followers. Yeah. A lot of the posts blamed the victim, as so often happens, for sneaking out of the house and being dressed the way that she was. And haven't we heard this before? Now, typically, and this is where things are going to get a little bit raw. Typically, when you have a suspect that age, they go through some sort of a juvenile court system. And I'm not exactly sure. My guess is it varies from state to state. But in this case, the state of Florida, because this crime was so heinous, this young lady was stabbed 114 times. 49 of those wounds were defensive wounds. And I'm speculating here, but the terror that she must have been going through to sustain 49 wounds on her hands, arms, and face, while this person was on top of her, stabbing her. It must have been at least minutes. And that's a very long time to be in that situation, being stabbed, your blood is oozing out of you, and fighting for your life. The horror that she must have went through had to be unspeakable. Part of the blade of the knife was found embedded in her scalp. And that knife with the missing part was later retrieved by the sheriff's department. The prosecutor, the state attorney, R.J. Lariza, I have a little soundbite right here. Let's check this out. This is what he said about Aiden being charged as an adult.
First off, I want to tell you, it brings me no pleasure to be charging a 14-year-old as an adult with first-degree murder. But I can tell you also that the executive team and I reviewed all the facts, all the circumstances, the applicable law, and it was not a difficult decision to make that he should be charged as an adult. It's a sad decision and a sad state of affairs, but it was clear to us after we looked at what happened that it was not only appropriate to charge the defendant as an adult, but it was really the only choice that we could make.
Before I get on to doing some commentary about this and trying to dissect it with my opinion, just this one more late bit of news regarding this case. The mother of Aiden, Crystal Lane Smith, 35 years old, was indeed herself arrested sometime over the past few days for a third-degree felony for tampering with evidence. And the way I understand it so far, she tried to wash blood out of some clothing. Yeah, so then there's that. All right, a lot to go through here. Let's talk about Tristan Bailey. Haven't we learned our lesson by now in regard to blaming the victim? Has that not been pounded into our heads enough? Tristan was a 13-year-old girl, a cheerleader, had her whole life ahead of her. What could she have possibly done to deserve getting stabbed 114 times? In regard to sneaking out of the house, I would be willing to bet that most of us, if we haven't snuck out of the house in the middle of the night as adolescents, at the very least, we got into a lot of mischief that our parents didn't know about. You know, parents cannot be glued to their children 24 hours a day. If you've ever taken care of a child or a pet or someone who is elderly, all it takes is for the phone to ring, a knock to come at the door, some sort of a distraction. You fall asleep at the wrong time, and tragedy can happen. Most of the time, fate is on our side. Most of the time, these things don't result in death. But tragically enough, it happens. And in this regard, I don't really place any blame at this time on the parents. I don't know enough about their situation, but between Tristan Bailey and her parents, the victims in this case, no blame. When are we going to learn our lesson? Someone who stabs somebody else to death and stabs them 114 times in the process, that's the person to blame. What about the mother of this alleged perpetrator, the suspect? You know, I'm not going to be so generous with her. I can understand a mother's love. We've all been to the ball game, and there's that mother yelling at the coach to put in her precious brat into the game. We've all been there for that. We've all heard mothers defend their children to the ninth degree when their kids are nothing but brats, spoiled kids. I guess that's what mothers do. And that's another discussion, how harmful that is in the long run, but I can understand that. And I would even go as far to say is I can understand a mother whose child is being charged with murder. I can understand that mother not testifying against their child. I can understand that. But I've heard a lot of people talking about this case, and there's this tone like, well, you can't blame a mother for protecting her child. Protecting her child. That's an interesting statement. Protecting someone who stabbed another child to death with 114 stab wounds. How much protection does someone like that deserve? And here again, we're not just talking about protecting. We're not just talking about being evasive. We're not talking about testifying against her own son. We're talking about tampering with evidence. What kind of a mother would wash the blood out of clothing that their own child was wearing while they stabbed a 13-year-old girl to death 114 times? This isn't protecting your child from getting trouble for soaping windows. No. She doesn't get a pass from me. She tampered with evidence in a murder case. I don't care whether it's her son or not. No, she don't get a pass from me. I would hope they're not lenient with her either if this all pans out. He's guilty and all this other stuff. And, and this Aiden himself. A lot of people have been asking, the state of Florida, why is this person being charged as an adult? Again, particularly heinous crime. It shows planning. To sit on top of someone while they're trying to defend themselves, stabbing through their hands, stabbing through their arms, trying to kill them, is a very deliberate act. And he apparently mentioned he would do this on social media and in person. So this is a classic case of if you're old enough to do the crime, you're old enough to do the time. You know, when I was that age, I did mischievous things, let air out of tires and things like that. But I never felt the urge. I can't imagine having a conversation with my friends. Hey, you know what? That girl in our class, it would be nice to take her somewhere and stab her 100 times, wouldn't it? I mean, you know right from wrong when you're that age. There's a difference between getting into mischievous trouble and murdering someone. And I don't care how you break this down. I agree with the state of Florida. This crime was of a particular heinous nature, and it should be tried in adult court. Now, in the state of Florida, he can't get the death penalty, being a juvenile, but he can go to jail for life. That's fine with me. The other thing that on the peripheral of this is the unbelievable lack of respect for life that so many children have. And it's not just the suspect in this case, but it's what followed on social media. The feeding frenzy for attention regarding this case, about the murder, about saying horrible things just to get attention. How can we outdo each other? Saying bad things about this young girl who was stabbed so many times. And where are these kids' parents? I mean, this is I believe that's a fair question. You know, when I was very young, and when I was probably maybe 11 years old, something like that, there was a young man who went to our school. I believe he was a year older than I was. And he was struck by lightning. And a lot of people don't understand lightning. Quite frankly, there's not 100% agreement in terms of how lightning chooses to strike. There's different types of lightning. There's the main bolt. There's the tributaries to the bolt. And depending on how you get struck, some strikes are survivable and others are not. And this one was not. I don't want to get into the graphic details of this other than to say he never knew what hit him. It was over in a split second. And the paramedics had a hard time separating him from his bike. And that's kind of an interesting thing, too. I've known for a long time that being on rubber tires doesn't protect you, because he was riding his bike when he got hit. And the reason I'm bringing this up is our school was in shock. And I remember going to the funeral with my school and how somber all these young people were. And I don't know if that would happen today. I can't help but wonder if there wouldn't be somebody taking pictures of the young man who had gotten killed by lightning and posting them on social media. And I can't help but wonder if there wouldn't be all kinds of crude jokes being made about this type of thing if it happened today. I hope I'm wrong. But it surely doesn't play out in a lot of these things, because this is a prime example of how out of control all the kids and their families seem to be. And to me, the total lack of respect for human life is jaw-dropping in a lot of these cases. I don't know what to say about it. Now, in all honesty, there have been some vigils, and for the sake of being thorough, I'm sure there's a lot of young people who have been very traumatized by this. People that knew Tristan and loved her. I'm not trying to make it sound like all of these kids. That's the trap that we fall into today. You know, well, it isn't all. Okay, so it isn't all. I'm sure there's a lot of kids who were very moved and saddened by this and shocked by it. And I'm sure the families were too. But there's enough that took this as the next thing to go viral that it's very troubling to me. It is very troubling. And it happens often enough in these types of situations to a significant degree that it causes a lot of pause, or at least it should cause a lot of pause with a lot of us. And the other thing that strikes me about this is the lack of respect for law enforcement. You know, taking the social media pictures, sitting in the back seat of a cop car while you're possibly going to get arrested for murder. That's pretty bold. Now, I understand, the certain climate that's out there right now regarding law enforcement. That's a deep subject. There's certainly been problems with law enforcement. But the idea that getting into trouble for murder is a joke. The taunting that was involved in some of this, if you get into the details of it, if you look it up, and the way some of the people that were questioned about this treated the police. Like, this was all a big joke. And, there's no accountability, even for murder. We're not talking about a kid who's lazy. We're not talking about a kid who don't want to get a job. We're not talking about a kid who won't clean his room. We're talking about a lack of accountability to the point that he's having fun in the back of a cruiser about to be accused and arrested for murder. And all his friends, too. They took part in this very lightheartedly, posting things online, not giving a damn what people they are hurting in the process, what attention they are going to call to themselves by local law enforcement and getting investigated or what have you. It's just amazing to me. And I'm pretty much out of things to say on this. My heart grieves for the family of Tristan Bailey. My heart grieves for all of her close friends at that school who really did care about a human life being lost. My heart grieves for them. But I'm also confused about how things unfold today. How these things become a circus. A circus that's not even taken seriously. Anyway, I'm Billy Dees. This has been the Billy Dees Podcast. I don't know if this was an enjoyable podcast per se. Interesting, maybe. If you have a comment and you would like to tweet me, I'm real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees. In my Twitter bio, I have links to just about all the other places that I am online. Real easy to find, though. Billy Dees on just about everything, or Billy Dees Podcast, Facebook, YouTube. And here again on all the major podcast networks, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those are our two big ones. We've been on there a long time, have a very long presence on those platforms. We're also on iHeartRadio and TuneIn and Stitcher and on down the line. I'm Billy Dees. I hope you have a great week. And we have some great stuff coming up for you in the next couple of weeks. So every week a new episode right here on the Billy Dees Podcast. Have a great day.
You are listening to the Billy Dees Podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Palatichuk. I'm an independent film director and screenwriter. I'm also an independent comic book artist and creator. I want to let you know about my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast. It's a weekly podcast where I interview other independent filmmakers and other artists from the Twin Cities area. You can find the show on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon Radio, as well as distributor Podbean. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, if you're interested in how independent films get made or the process of filmmaking, also, if you're interested in other artists' process and works as well, tune into my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, where it's not over till the guests say it's over.
Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees Podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.